Welcome back children, and this is a second video for chapter 9, Tourism, Transport and Communication. We have a graph on page 61 and we need to read the graph and answer the questions. Okay, now when you match the data with the y-axis for the particular year, you get certain data in lakhs. If you see here, the data is about the number of tourists in lakhs. So we have the years like 1995, 2000, 2005, 2010 and 2015. Look at the index. The blue line is for Brazil and the pink line is for India. Now what you notice about the graph straight away is that initially the number of tourists in Brazil were larger than India. Initially, in fact, in 1995, both had 20 lakh people as tourists. So in 1995 both started together, but Brazil got more tourists than India. But after 2009, around 2010, we find the pink line crossing and going beyond Brazil's number of tourists. Okay, so that's a good news that in India tourists are attracted. For what reasons we will be studying during the course of this chapter. Now this is the graph that we have and there are a few questions here. The first question is, which country attracted more tourists in 1995? So now if you look at 1995, we find that both are equal. Both are situated at 20 lakh tourists. How do I know it's lakh? From the y-axis. Okay, you find there it is number of tourists in lakhs. So the answer is that both the countries had equal in 1995. Then in which country did more international tourists arrive in the year 2000? Now in 2000 you find the blue line much higher. It stands at 58. So the answer definitely is Brazil. The third question is, in which year can an increase be seen in the number of international tourists in India? Now we find here 2005. Okay, it was below Brazil, but around 2010, if you look here, okay, this is 2010 here, so around, or rather you can say after 2009. In your textbook it's closer to 2009. So after 2009 we see an increase in international tourists arriving in our country. So the answer is from 2009 to 2010. What was the number of international tourists in the year 2015 for both the countries? Now India is higher and it stands at 138, and for Brazil it is 62 lakhs. So 138 lakhs and 62 lakhs. And what was the difference between them? Now the difference is 138 minus 62 lakhs, and that comes to 76 lakh tourists. Now I have not put lakh over here, so that's a mistake. You need to write 76 lakh tourists. Okay, if you do not put the unit, then you do not get that 1 mark. The next question is, what could be the reason of increase in tourists in India after the year 2010? Why do we find that all of a sudden after 2010, or rather after 2009, between 9 and 10, there was an increase in international tourists in India? What attracted these tourists? So definitely it's government policies to attract tourists, because we get good amount of foreign exchange when tourists come to India. So the changed government policies could be some of the reasons. Now these reasons are not mentioned in the textbook. We need to think and answer. So more investments and boost given to tourism. Government invested more. Better transport facilities. The foreigners want good transport. Okay, they don't want bumpety rides or like camelback rides. Okay, they do enjoy camelback, but not on the roadside. Okay, so therefore they look out for better transport. So that's what the government paid attention to. Better advertisements in touring sector. Easy booking facilities through online portals now. And developing tourist places, more sanctions that are given for tourism sector, new approach that we studied last year about agro-tourism. that is visit to rural areas, understanding the agriculture of India, etc., along with tourism. Ecotourism, that is environmental tourism, like going to forest places, or it could be a hill station. Then health tourism is another growing tourism in India, because we have good doctors, no doubt about it. We have specialists, okay, and world-class doctors are also present in India. Moreover, the foreigners find our currency much cheaper for them, so our rates are much lower compared to foreign countries. So they come to India for health checkups, and also for operations. Then religious tourism and also cultural tourism has been encouraged by our government. Brazil and tourism on page 61 now. The main factors that attract tourists in Brazil, which we have already seen in the first video. Okay, I showed you beautiful pictures and glimpses of the tourist places, top 10 tourist places of Brazil. If you have not seen, please go and watch that again. Okay, the reason is because of the clean, white, sandy beaches, attractive sea coasts. Okay, on the northern and on the eastern side, beautiful islands, especially in the northern coast. Brazil is gifted by many beautiful islands, the deep, dense forests of Amazon. In fact, the largest number of species are found here in the Amazon rainforest, and it's also challenging, that we studied earlier. Variety of birds and colorful birds and animals, development of new capital city of Brasilia. Brasilia invested a lot of money in making its place more attractive, so that more tourists can be attracted. Development of cities like Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo, and development of ecotourism by the Brazilian government. The next graph is, can you tell? Now, though it is not for 2020, but it's always necessary to understand the graph, so that the understanding, now the graphs that are given here are so that you understand the chapter in a better way. So I would tell you not to skip, but just quickly we will glance through it. Okay, now here what the graph is all about, it's a tourism and economic graph of 2016. Here the blue color indicates the percentage of population engaged in tourism, and the pink color indicates the contribution of tourism towards GDP. Straight away, looking at the graph, you can understand that the blue color for population, that is India, there is more population engaged in tourism. But when we look at the contribution towards GDP, we find Brazil is more. Okay, contributing more tourism, Brazilian tourism, contributes more towards tourism. Why? I will explain to you very soon. What type of graph is this? Now, what type of graph is this? Have you ever seen this type of graph? Yes, this is called as a joint bar graph. Okay, it's not a compound, it's called as a joint bar graph. What does the graph show? I've just explained to you. It shows two things. One is percentage of population engaged in tourism, and second is the contribution of tourism towards GDP for both India and Brazil. Which country's tourism has a larger share in contribution towards GDP? When it comes to contribution towards GDP, it is Brazil. Which country has a larger population engaged in the tourism sector? And that is India. Okay, now why is this so? Though we find a huge number of people, more people engaged in tourism in India, yet the contribution towards GDP is low. Any guesses? Keep thinking, I'll answer it very soon. Okay, now to analyze the graph, the first graph 9.1, the number of international tourists visiting India in 2015 was much more than Brazil. Okay, and you can also add one more point, that the international tourists in India started increasing after 2009. The second graph of 9.2, the proportion of Indian population engaged in tourism sector is more than that of Brazil, but the share of tourism in Brazil in India is lower than that of Brazil. Now what we need to understand here when we say GDP, so whatever is the income from tourism sector, that is divided by the total population, and that's how we get GDP. And India has a huge population compared to that of Brazil, and therefore though we find the number of population engaged in tourism in India is higher, the contribution of tourism towards GDP in India is lower than Brazil. Let's understand with a small calculation here. Okay, now India earns say 20,000 from tourism. Now contribution towards GDP 20,000 divided by total population 121 crore. So it comes to 165 as contribution to GDP. Okay, 165 rupees now. And for Brazil, now say Brazil earns 10,000 rupees from tourism. And when we say contribution to a GDP, that is 10,000 divided by only 19 crore. So here we get 526 rupees. So now you find that Brazil's contribution to a GDP is more. But actually India is earning much more than Brazil. But when we talk about the GDP, then we divide it with total population, and therefore the contribution becomes less. Okay, and this I have already discussed in the first slide. Think about it. What are the factors responsible for development of these tourist sites in Brazil? So I'll leave you with these few pictures that are given on page 62. Salvador, you can look at the beautiful scenic places. So you can imagine how much of investment goes into developing these places. Fortaleza is another port center. Okay, then you have the football stadium at Manaus. Now this was constructed from 2010 to 2014 as part of hosting of the 2014 World Cup FIFA. Okay, and I'm sure many of you have watched this FIFA as well. Then Brazilian marine tourism is also gaining a lot of importance. The great whales, the white clean sandy beaches and the attractive sea coasts are the main reason. Now in the next video, I will start with India and tourism. Till then, take care. Bye-bye. See you very soon. God bless.